The first thing Maggie Carter saw when she turned from the sink was a masked man stepping across her living room floor like he owned it. He didn't knock, he didn't shout, he just pointed a gun at her chest and smiled. And in that instant, as fear gripped her spine and time froze, Maggie knew two things: she might not make it out alive, and her only hope wasn't the police or a gun in a drawer. It was a German shepherd sleeping under the stairs, with scars on his ribs and war still in his eyes. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Timber Hollow was the kind of town where time moved slower than the snowfall. Nestled in a quiet stretch of northern Montana, the town slept beneath a quilt of early winter snow. Morning fog curled lazily above the frost-bitten pine trees, and pale sunlight filtered through the haze like an old photograph. It was barely 8 a.m., and already the ground crunched underfoot with frozen grass and the delicate crust of fresh powder. From the edge of a modest farmhouse tucked between two sloping hills, a trail of paw prints led to a wooden fence and stopped just short of a barbed wire boundary. Standing at the edge of that fence was Lily Carter, 12 years old, bundled in a thick red parka 2 sizes too big, snow-dusted boots, and knitted gloves missing their thumb cap. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her breath rose in soft clouds. Her hair, a mess of untamed chestnut curls, peeked out from under her beanie. She had the wiry frame of a child who spent more time outside than in, and an observant gaze that often lingered too long, as if she saw things others missed. Lily was not a loud child, but she carried a quiet resilience that had grown sharper since her father passed away 2 years ago in a car crash. Since then, the world had seemed less safe, less predictable, and Lily had grown up faster than she should have. At her side, sitting tall and immovable like a statue of old bronze, was Valor, a 7-year-old German shepherd. 90 pounds of disciplined muscle and unwavering focus. His coat, once coal black, had begun to show signs of silver along his muzzle and hind legs. His ears, tall and alert, flicked slightly with every shift in the wind. His amber eyes were intelligent, searching, and always scanning. Valor had served as a military working dog, 3 tours in Afghanistan, trained in IED detection, combat search and rescue, and personnel protection. He had once charged into enemy fire alongside Marines, dragging wounded soldiers to safety, but retirement hadn't come as a reward during his last mission. A roadside blast injured his hind leg and left deep mental scars, just like the ones he'd witnessed in soldiers around him. Since then, he had learned to walk on soft carpet instead of desert sand, and Timber Hollow had become his battlefield of healing. Still watching the woods like a sentry, huh? Lily murmured, gently scratching behind his ear. Valor tilted his head into her touch, but his eyes remained locked on the tree line behind them. The farmhouse's screen door creaked open, and Maggie Carter stepped out. She was in her late 30s, tall and slender, with a permanent line between her brows that even laughter rarely erased. Her dark blonde hair was tied in a loose bun, and her sweatshirt bore the logo of a cybersecurity firm in Helena. Maggie had once been outgoing, quick to smile and slow to judge, but since her husband Sam's death, she'd become cautious, practical, and fiercely protective. She balanced work-from-home contracts with single parenthood and kept a handgun in her nightstand, a fact only Valor and her late husband's brother knew. The trauma of losing Sam had taught her that security wasn't something you hoped for. It was something you built brick by digital brick. "You two okay?" Maggie asked. tightening her coat against the cold. Lily turned, one mitten waving, "Just doing our rounds." Maggie nodded, then paused as her gaze drifted beyond the fence, her brow furrowed. "Is that?" Lily followed her mother's line of sight. A black SUV, dust-caked and unfamiliar, sat parked across the dirt road, half hidden behind the tree line. Its windows were tinted, and the engine steamed faintly against the cold air, as though recently turned off. Valor growled, low and guttural. Maggie's expression tightened. Inside, now. Lily didn't argue. She knew that tone. She turned and jogged toward the house. Valor close behind, his ears back, tail stiff, as they stepped inside. Maggie locked the door and drew the curtains. Her fingers hovered near the keypad for the security system, and she double-checked the rifle cabinet under the stairs, just a glance. Just in case. Probably just a hunter. She muttered aloud, though her voice lacked conviction. Lily sank into the armchair by the fireplace. Valor sitting pressed against her legs like a living shield. His muscles remained tense, his eyes trained on the door. "Do you think it's someone dangerous?" she asked. Maggie hesitated, kneeling in front of her daughter. "I don't know. But if there's one thing your father taught us, it's to trust our gut. And Valor's too." In the next room. Maggie's phone buzzed. She rose to check it. Just a work email, and then glanced out the kitchen window once more. The SUV was gone by late afternoon. The sky darkened earlier than usual. Timber Hollow's winters were long and unforgiving. A pale moon had risen early, casting silver lines across the frost-bitten grass. Valor remained restless, padding between rooms, checking windows. Maggie had fed him earlier, but he hadn't touched his bowl. That meant something. Something wasn't right. Outside. Frost gathered on the mailbox. A storm was forecasted overnight, but the real danger was already circling. They just didn't know it yet. Not yet. The snow had thickened by the time the final school bell rang in Timber Hollow Middle School. Cold wind tugged at scarves and jackets as students hurried toward the pickup lane, where headlights glowed through flurries like silent fireflies. Lily Carter, wrapped in her red winter coat and striped wool scarf, sat on the edge of a wooden bench outside the gymnasium, waiting for her mother's familiar SUV. It was nearly 3:35, later than usual. Maggie Carter was never late, not without a call or a message. Lily's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out quickly, her fingers pink from the cold. A message blinked on the screen. "Hey honey, work ran late. Walk home today. Okay, it's a beautiful afternoon for it." The words stopped her heart cold, not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't say. Maggie Carter would never send something like that without confirming in person, and beautiful afternoon didn't sound like her at all, especially not on a freezing weekday when the clouds hung low and gray. Lily's mind flashed to an old conversation with her dad. Years ago, before he died, he'd set up a rule. If anyone ever asked her to do something unusual or dangerous, they'd have to give the family password. He called it the safety code. It was their unbreakable rule. She typed quickly, "What's the password?" A few seconds passed. Then the reply came, "Don't be silly. Honey, just start walking. I'll meet you halfway." Lily's breath caught. Wrong. All wrong. Her hands trembled as she backed out of the messages and opened her emergency contact list. Her thumb hovered over Mrs. Callahan's name, her elderly neighbor who lived just a few houses down the road. But something stopped her. She glanced toward the main office. Maybe it would be safer to go there first and tell an adult. She stood, clutching her phone, her heart pounding, but still calm on the outside. Her dad had always said, "Stay calm, then act smart." nearly 1,000 miles away, in a dormitory on the University of Washington's campus in Seattle. Daniel Carter leaned over his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. At 19, Daniel was tall, thin, and slightly awkward in his movements, his long fingers always twitching at a keyboard or fidgeting with a pen. He wore an old military hoodie that had once belonged to his dad, now faded at the cuffs. Daniel had inherited his father's cautious instincts and his mother's technical mind. After Sam Carter's death, Daniel dove headfirst into cybersecurity and digital forensics. It wasn't just a field of study, it was personal. An alert popped up on his screen. Blinking red, he frowned. It was a tracer from the email watchdog script he'd built and linked to his mother's professional inbox at the bank. Unauthorized login, spoofed device, and, he narrowed his eyes, an IP origin in Texas. Routed through a temporary node, too precise to be random, he cross-referenced it with his personal breach database. The same node had shown up in a previous penetration of the First National Bank's firewall, the one his mother had flagged weeks ago but couldn't trace. A sinking feeling gripped his chest. Someone had accessed her email to send a message, and that someone had a reason. Daniel sat up straighter and began typing commands rapidly, tracing the packet route, scraping metadata. He didn't have full access to the bank's infrastructure, but he knew how to work the margins. He set up a data tunnel and pinged the spoofed message header, isolating it. Whoever had used it wasn't just covering their tracks, they were targeting, and that meant it was no accident. He stared at the timestamp. The message had been sent just 20 minutes ago, right when Lily would have been getting out of school. Daniel reached for his phone. The light was fading fast over Timber Hollow, casting long shadows across the Carter property. A hush had fallen over the snow-covered yard, broken only by the occasional snap of wind against the pine trees. Inside the house, Maggie Carter stood in the kitchen, watching the security monitor above the sink flicker with a low-resolution feed of the driveway. She felt something she couldn't explain, something colder than the Montana air, heavier than silence. Then it came. The back door creaked. She turned. 2 men in black, faces covered, slipped into the house with practiced stealth. One carried a pistol. The other held a small device, an electronic scrambler used to block outgoing signals. Maggie froze for half a second before instinct took over. She reached for the drawer beside the fridge, where she kept a compact pistol, but one of the men was faster. He kicked the drawer closed and shoved her against the counter. "Don't try anything stupid," he hissed, voice muffled. Maggie struggled, but they restrained her quickly. Duct tape over her mouth, zip ties at her wrists. A third man entered, older, thinner, calm. He didn't speak. He simply handed her a phone. "Text your daughter. Tell her to come home," said the man with the gun. Maggie's mind raced. She stared at the screen and typed, "Hey honey, work ran late, walk home today." Okay, it's a beautiful afternoon for it. She hit send, then closed her eyes. It was the word beautiful that mattered. Upstairs, Valor, the German shepherd, stood at the top of the staircase. His fur bristled along his spine, his ears twitching with every sound below. He had felt it the moment they arrived, the shift in vibration, the wrongness in the air. Valor didn't bark. He didn't growl. He waited, still as a statue, watching from the shadows. He'd been trained for this, not for barking or chasing, but for precision, for protection. His eyes remained locked on the hallway. He was a soldier again, across the country, in a quiet dorm room at the University of Washington. Daniel Carter stared at the alert on his laptop. The network breach had just confirmed. a spoofed message sent from his mother's number, originating through an IP he'd flagged earlier from Texas. He reviewed the data again, timing, routing, signature metadata. This wasn't phishing. It was a targeted hijack. He didn't panic. He uploaded the compiled evidence into the FBI's cybercrime submission portal, flagged the report high urgency, and attached geolocation data from the trace. Then he called his mother. No answer. Back in Timber Hollow. The front gate opened. A black SUV rolled up the driveway. Maggie sat on the couch, duct tape pulled from her mouth now, but hands still tied. One of the men stood beside her, gun drawn. She watched the vehicle through the window, eyes burning with fear. They have her. One man muttered, "She's here." The front door opened. Two figures stepped inside, one man holding the arm of a young girl. Lily Carter, pale-faced, her arms bound behind her back, stepped through the door with a look not of panic, but calculation, the moment her eyes found her mother's. She froze. "Mom." Maggie tried to move forward, but was held back. Lily's captor stepped forward. That was when the staircase exploded with motion. Valor descended like a force of nature. A silent shadow turned into fury. He launched at the man holding Lily, knocking him sideways with a snarl and a flash of teeth. The weapon dropped. The man screamed, collapsing as Valor's jaws found the soft meat of his arm. The room erupted into shouts. One of the other intruders aimed his weapon, but Valor moved fast, too fast. He twisted, lunged, and brought down a second attacker, his weight slamming the man into the floor. Maggie seized the moment to grab the dropped pistol from under the couch and stood in front of her daughter, her hands still partially bound, but shaking with resolve. The remaining attacker paused. Outside, faint sirens echoed through the trees. Daniel's report had reached them. Valor stood between Lily and danger, breath steaming, eyes wild but focused. He had waited. He had watched. And when the time came, he did what he was trained to do. He saved her. The living room of the Carter farmhouse was a shattered echo chamber of adrenaline, ragged breathing, and the distant wail of sirens weaving through snow-drenched pine. The warm, rustic space, once defined by throw blankets, bookshelves, and the smell of cedar, had turned into a battlefield. Valor, the 7-year-old German shepherd, stood over one of the attackers. His paw braced on the man's shoulder. The intruder whimpered beneath the crushing weight, afraid to move, blood darkening the fabric of his sleeve where canine teeth had found purchase. Valor's flank trembled. A shallow gash near his ribs oozed crimson, staining his fur in slow, rhythmic pulses. But his eyes never wavered. The fight had not left him. Across the room, Maggie Carter crouched behind the upturned coffee table, shielding Lily, her daughter, now freed of the zip ties but still frozen with shock. Maggie had a grazed bruise blooming along her temple where she'd taken a hit during the initial scuffle. Her breathing was controlled, sharp, her left hand wrapped around a pistol she hadn't fired. Yet, her right hand was pressed over Lily's shoulder protectively. Her thoughts burned with calculation. 3 men still unaccounted for. 1 possibly escaped through the rear exit. 2 were out cold or pinned, but the third, silent since Valor's attack, had retreated into the hallway, possibly armed. Maggie's phone had been smashed during the struggle, its screen spiderwebbed. No signal to call for help, but help was already on its way, from much farther than she knew, in Seattle. Daniel Carter sat hunched in the back corner of the computer lab at Alder Hall, his fingers flying over the keyboard with surgical precision. His hood was pulled low, casting shadows across his jawline. Beside him sat Dr. Fiona Reeves, a woman in her late 40s with short, practical salt and pepper hair and eyes that read code like novels. She had once worked as a digital counterterrorism analyst with the FBI and now taught at the university part-time, normally patient and precise. Tonight she leaned forward, brows furrowed. "I've located the outbound packet logs," Daniel said. "They've been masking their location using rotating proxy chains. But I triangulated the origin of the command signal, Carter Ranch, 5 miles east of Timber Hollow proper." Dr. Reeves nodded. "This isn't just a one-time attack." Daniel brought up the surveillance signal they'd intercepted through the group's own scrambled frequencies. The cartel cell had used a temporary Wi-Fi relay station hidden inside what appeared to be a farm utility van parked outside the Carter property. Through careful hijacking of open ports and unsecured access points, Daniel had gotten in, and now he could see them. Low-res footage from the intruders' hidden body cams flickered on the screen. They were watching through internal feeds. Daniel whispered, "They wired up her own home." He copied GPS coordinates, encrypted them, and sent them through a secure FBI task force line tied to Dr. Reeves's clearance. "This should bring boots," she said, "and fast." Then she placed a hand gently on Daniel's shoulder. "You did the right thing." Daniel didn't speak. His mouth was a hard line, his knuckles pale from gripping the mouse. He just hoped they were fast enough. Back in Timber Hollow, the farmhouse creaked as wind pressed against the windows. One of the unconscious men groaned, his hand twitching beside a dropped stun baton. Valor took a slow step closer, baring his teeth in warning, blood still dripping along his ribs. His hind leg stiffened slightly, an old war injury flaring from the tension, but he remained in position, unwilling to surrender ground. From the hallway came a sudden noise, glass shattering. Maggie sprang up, sweeping the pistol toward the source. "Don't move," she barked, but the shadow darted behind a doorway. She motioned for Lily to stay down, then moved around the couch, pistol raised. The house was small enough that even whispered steps echoed on the hardwood. Suddenly, a figure lunged, another masked man, this one leaner, faster. He swung a metal pipe toward Maggie's head. She ducked and fired. The shot cracked through the living room like thunder. The bullet struck the man's thigh, and he dropped with a scream. Valor lunged to intercept, grabbing the attacker's arm as he fell. The man howled, twisting against the shepherd's unrelenting grip. Maggie ran to Lily, pulling her into her arms. Then, finally, sirens. Closer now. Tires skidded in the snow outside. Voices barked commands. Flashing red and blue lights filtered through the windows. "Police, drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them." Maggie stood slowly, both arms raised, still shielding Lily. Valor released the downed attacker at last, stepping back but never turning his back to the threat. His tail was low, ears twitching, body quivering from both effort and pain. 3 officers burst through the front door, guns drawn, followed closely by 2 federal agents in tactical gear marked FBI. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and calm demeanor, stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you Maggie Carter?" "Yes," she breathed. "You're safe now. We've got the call from Seattle. Your son's report gave us everything we needed." Her knees almost buckled. She caught herself on the armrest. He knew. "He saved your lives," the agent said. 3 weeks had passed since the snow-stained night when Valor became a soldier once more. The Carter farmhouse, once shaken by invasion, now stood repaired and reinforced. The windows had been replaced with bullet-resistant panes. Motion sensors lined the outer fence, and Maggie's home office now included a secured server rack humming with silent vigilance. Outside, Timber Hollow was thawing into spring, but within the Carter family, deeper transformations had taken root. Maggie Carter, usually composed and razor-focused, had changed. Her once guarded demeanor had softened, though her eyes held a new fire, not of fear, but resolve. She had resigned from her role as senior infrastructure analyst at First Mountain Federal, trading the high-stress, high-access job for a quieter, but no less important, role as an independent cybersecurity consultant. She worked from home now, choosing her clients, designing systems for local schools and nonprofits, but beneath the calm exterior, Maggie was still a sentry. She trusted people less, but believed in her family more. The woman who once grieved in silence had become someone who looked her daughter in the eye every morning and said, "You're safe," because I made it so across the kitchen table from her. Daniel Carter stirred his coffee without looking down. He had returned home from Seattle for the weekend, now a paid intern under the FBI's Cybercrime Rapid Response Task Force. He was still lanky, still disheveled, but his movements had gained purpose. He spoke less often, but when he did, people listened. His role in tracing the cartel's digital trail had led to the arrests of 6 operatives across 3 states. The agents now knew his name. One of them had even said, "You ever want a badge, kid, call us." But Daniel wasn't in it for glory. He was in it for people like his mom, people like Lily. He looked up at the sound of heavy footsteps. Valor, fur darker now that his winter coat had shed, limped slightly as he entered the room. The scar on his left flank had healed into a tuft of uneven fur. He had put on 2 pounds, the vet said, most of it muscle. At his side, Lily Carter walked barefoot, cradling a laminated piece of paper with bright yellow borders. She was 13 now, or close enough to it to insist on carrying her own bag and speaking with a quiet sense of justice she hadn't shown before the attack. She had changed too, grown into her skin. The girl who once whispered behind Valor now stood beside him like a junior partner. She'd been attending counseling sessions, journaling, and asking tougher questions that morning. She'd asked her mother what it meant to forgive someone who tried to hurt you. Maggie didn't have an answer, but knew the question itself meant Lily had already begun the journey. "Are you ready?" Maggie asked her daughter, gesturing toward the paper. Lily nodded. "I want to take him with me." Maggie smiled. He wouldn't miss it for the world. The town's middle school auditorium was small, with wood-paneled walls and a stage that creaked under every student's footstep. The annual Hero Presentation Day had always been a light-hearted event. Kids brought in family members who were nurses, firemen, or veterans. But this year, something felt heavier. There were more parents in attendance. A few sheriff deputies stood quietly in the back, and when Lily stepped onto the stage, leading Valor by a custom leather harness engraved with his name, every eye followed her. She stood straight, her wild curls tucked under a navy headband. Valor seated calmly beside her, his ears forward, tail curled at his side. She cleared her throat and began. Most people think heroes wear uniforms or badges. Some of them do, but some wear fur. Some used to detect bombs in places most people can't pronounce. Some used to fight wars, and then learned how to be part of a family. She looked down at Valor, who raised his head slightly at her voice. "This is Valor. He's not just a dog, he's a soldier. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan before he got hurt and came home to us. He helped save my mom, me, and himself from people who wanted to hurt us. And he didn't do it because he was told to. He did it because he chose to." She paused, took a breath, my dad used to say. Some warriors never stop fighting. They just find new people to protect. That's who Valor is. He's not retired. He just found a new battlefield. A quieter one, our home. The audience rose to its feet. Not because they were told, but because they felt it. Several teachers had tears in their eyes. One boy in the front row whispered to his friend, "That's the dog from the news." And it was, after the presentation, Sheriff Jim Rourke. A tall man with a silver mustache and a deeply lined face that softened only around animals. Stepped onto the stage. In his hands was a small plaque wrapped in navy velvet. A metal medallion hung at the center. Canine Service Honor, a rare award usually reserved for active duty police dogs. He knelt beside Valor, voice warm but steady, for courage, instinct, and unwavering loyalty in the face of danger. He said, loud enough for the room to hear, "We honor you, Valor, as a protector of this town and the Carter family." Lily smiled. Valor licked her wrist once, then turned his eyes to the audience. Not afraid, not aggressive, just alert, still watching, always watching. That night, the Carters sat on their porch. The air was cool, pine-scented. Daniel had lit a small lantern and was fiddling with an old radio. Maggie sipped hot tea. Lily leaned against Valor, her head on his shoulder. "We made it," Maggie said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, but we're not done, no," Lily added. "But we're stronger now." Valor raised his head at the sound of distant crows calling, and Maggie whispered, "And we've got our soldier, sometimes. The greatest warriors do not carry rifles or wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs, scarred by battles seen and unseen. And they teach us that bravery is not about force, it is about love." Valor was more than just a dog. He was a reminder that protection can come in quiet forms, and miracles often wear fur, in a world full of uncertainty. This story reminds us that divine protection often shows up in ways we least expect, through a loyal companion, a courageous act, a child's wisdom, or a mother's unwavering love. Maybe it wasn't just training that brought Valor to act that day. Maybe it was something more. Maybe God placed him in that family to be their guardian when they needed him most. In everyday life, we are all fighting silent battles. Some we see, some we don't. But if we look closely, there are signs of grace all around us, through the people and creatures God sends to walk beside us. So whatever you are facing today, remember this: you are not alone. And sometimes, the answer to your prayer is already sitting at your feet. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder of hope. Leave a comment and tell us what it meant to you. And if you believe in unseen protection and the quiet power of love, comment Amen below. Subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God still performs through the hearts of animals and the strength of family. May God bless and protect you, just as He protected the Carters through Valor.